Welcome to News Beacon, your trusted source for breaking headlines, global insights, and sharp analysis from around the world. If you're new here, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss an update. The news hit like a digital shockwave. The US announced its harshest restrictions yet, a ban on exporting advanced semiconductor technology to China. This wasn't just a trade spat, it was a declaration of technological war. In Beijing and Shenzhen, engineers stared at their screens in disbelief. The flow of critical chips, the lifeblood of modern tech, was being cut off. Now that supply was threatened. The message from Washington was clear: China's tech rise would be contained. This was a wake-up call, a cold realization of deep vulnerability. The ban targeted the very foundation of China's ambition to become a global tech leader. The US had shown just how far it would go to maintain supremacy. A new path had to be forged, one built on homegrown innovation. The race for semiconductor independence had officially begun. For decades, China's economic miracle relied on importing high-value components and assembling them into finished goods. Nowhere was this more true than in electronics. China imported more semiconductors than oil. In some years, chip imports topped $300 billion, revealing a critical weakness. China was a manufacturing giant, but a small player in advanced chip design and production. The minds of devices came from America, Taiwan, and South Korea. This dependence was a known issue in Beijing long before US sanctions. Chinese leaders saw the risk. Their massive electronics industry and military modernization all ran on imported chips. The globalized system was efficient, but left China at the bottom of the value chain. The government tried to change this. Plans like Made in China 2025 targeted semiconductors. Billions were invested, but progress was slow. Building a chip industry requires capital, knowledge, and specialized equipment. Chinese firms could make older chips but struggled at the cutting edge. When US sanctions hit, China was caught vulnerable. Tech giants like Huawei relied on American design software and Taiwanese manufacturing. The dependence wasn't just on chips, it was the whole ecosystem: software, machines, patents. US pressure didn't create this vulnerability, but it exposed it in the harshest light. What was once a long-term concern became an immediate crisis. The race to close the gap was on. The US campaign was calculated and relentless. It began with targeted strikes. ZTE was nearly put out of business in 2018. The real target, Huawei, China's tech giant. The US put Huawei on the entity list, cutting off access to Google's Android and critical US components. Then, the rules expanded. Any company using American chip-making equipment needed a US license to supply Huawei. This move cut Huawei off from advanced chip manufacturing worldwide. The US used its control over key technology choke points to cripple a Chinese champion. The campaign broadened. The CHIPS and Science Act offered $52 billion to bring chip factories back to America, with guardrails to block expansion in China. The US also rallied allies like Japan and the Netherlands, home to companies making essential chip-making equipment. The strategy was comprehensive, targeting Chinese firms, the global supply chain, and China's future capabilities. This wasn't just a trade dispute, it was an effort to halt China's technological momentum. The US saw China's tech rise as a threat to economic and national security. By controlling semiconductors, the US aimed to contain that threat. For China, the choice was stark: accept technological inferiority or break free from containment. The pressure campaign forced China to rethink its entire approach. The world's most advanced technology had become a weapon. The chip war was now global, and the stakes had never been higher. The US had drawn a line in the silicon. China had no choice but to respond. The era of open technology was over. The world was entering a new phase of rivalry. The semiconductor became the front line. The consequences would be felt everywhere. China's response was swift and massive. Semiconductor independence became a top national priority. Beijing mobilized the full power of the state, pouring over $150 billion into the domestic chip industry. The strategy was comprehensive: funding research, building new factories, and coordinating across ministries, universities, and state-owned enterprises. Huge tax breaks and streamlined stock market access supported chip companies. The goal: a protected environment for Chinese firms to develop without immediate global competition. Talent was critical. China launched programs to attract engineers from around the world and expanded microelectronics education. Companies offered big salaries to poach experienced engineers. The race for talent was as fierce as the race for technology. The American sanctions made it clear relying on the global market was no longer safe. Self-sufficiency was the only way forward. The aim, a complete domestic supply chain, from design software to manufacturing equipment to finished chips. Many doubted China could succeed, but the leadership was resolute. The cost would be immense, but the alternative, dependence, was unacceptable. China was all in. US sanctions forged a new generation of Chinese tech champions. SMIC, China's largest chipmaker, became the focal point, pushing forward despite blacklisting. SMIC mastered older manufacturing processes and made surprising progress on advanced ones. Huawei, crippled in smartphones, pivoted, pouring billions into its chip design arm, HiSilicon, and investing in smaller chip firms. The goal: design and manufacture chips entirely within China. In memory chips, YMTC made strides, developing advanced NAND flash to rival global leaders. In chip design software, startups like Empyrean Technology worked to replace American EDA tools. Hundreds of new chip startups emerged, funded by government and private capital. These companies became the soldiers of the chip war, supported by government funding and guaranteed orders. The protected market allowed them to grow and learn. Challenges remained, but rapid progress was undeniable. The US tried to cut down China's giants, but instead, a forest of new competitors grew. China's chip ecosystem was rising. Before sanctions, the global chip industry thrived on cooperation. China was the world's largest chip consumer and assembly hub, sourcing the best chips from anywhere. Chinese firms used American software, Taiwanese fabs, and global suppliers. The system was efficient, and China's domestic chip industry was a low priority for many. But US pressure shattered this model. Now, access to foreign tech is uncertain. Security of supply trumps performance. A less powerful chip made in China is now more valuable than a top-tier foreign one. This shift created a huge domestic market for Chinese chip makers. The sanctions forced a painful but necessary reorientation. China is now building its own parallel semiconductor ecosystem. Since the sanctions, China's chip progress has been remarkable. SMIC, once generations behind, shocked the world by developing a 7-nanometer process using older equipment. In 2023, Huawei launched a phone with a sophisticated 7-nanometer chip designed and made in China. This proved China could produce advanced chips despite US controls. While still behind the absolute cutting edge, the leap was far beyond expectations. China also ramped up production of mature node chips, essential for cars, appliances, and industry. Dozens of new fabs focused on these older processes, aiming for global dominance in this segment. China is also building its own equipment and materials supply chain. Developing homegrown lithography and etching tools is tough, but progress is steady. US sanctions forced China to learn the entire stack, from sand to finished chip. The journey is transforming China from consumer to creator. The world underestimated China's resilience. The chip war made it stronger. China's push for chip self-sufficiency is reshaping the global market. The era of a single, integrated supply chain is ending. Two parallel tech ecosystems are emerging, one led by the US and allies, the other by China. Global companies now face restrictions and uncertainty in the Chinese market. The new order creates inefficiencies and raises costs. Countries must duplicate capabilities. The US and China are spending billions to build their own supply chains. For consumers, this means higher prices and less choice. Southeast Asia and India may benefit as companies seek alternatives to China, but these countries are caught between two giants, pressured to pick sides. The most significant effect: accelerated competition. By 2025, China could dominate mature node chips, gaining new leverage. The world faces a new technological standoff, fragmented, contentious, and unpredictable. The chip war is redrawing the map. The chip war will define the future tech landscape. The trend toward two competing ecosystems is accelerating. The US and allies will tighten controls, aiming to stay ahead in AI and quantum computing. China's resolve is only growing: massive investment and a focus on self-sufficiency. The next hurdle: developing advanced EUV lithography for cutting-edge chips. Meanwhile, China will expand its dominance in mature chips, using this as leverage. The rivalry creates permanent technological tension. Innovation may accelerate, but collaboration will suffer. For consumers, this means higher costs and incompatible products. The US pressure campaign awakened a sleeping giant. The world is now more divided and complex, a direct result of the day the Silicon Curtain fell.